Thanks very much for that introduction. That is quite a lot of pressure, to be honest. Like it's already been said, I'm a member of Trade Unionists for Independence in Glasgow, and I'm also a member of the Public and Commercial Services Trade Union. It's arguably one of the most active trade unions in the UK at the moment. I've been working alongside the Radical Independence campaign, which has got its conference coming up in November this year, and I wanted to just kind of outline the case for independence that we're working on within the trade union movement. I work in a particularly low paid area in the public sector, and it's just getting worse. Following the government's comprehensive spending review, we've seen a 1% pay cap on wages, which is a pay cut in real terms, an end to any notion of pay progression, which I don't think we've ever really seen. There was like a lot of stuff in the news about how public sector workers are so overpaid, getting a 7% wage rise year on year, and I can tell you from first-hand experience that that's absolutely not the case. The members of my trade union are fighting attacks, constant attacks on their jobs, their pay and their pensions. The government right now at Westminster is absolutely refusing to negotiate with us on all changes to terms and conditions, and given that we represent hundreds of thousands of low-paid workers, the government at Westminster is basically choosing to ignore us completely, and I think that tells you something very, very clearly about how interested in democracy and representation that this current government kind of has. I think one of the big news stories recently that kind of embodied a lot of the reasons that I'm going to vote for independence is around Royal Mail privatisation. Now, I haven't spoken to one person who thinks that this is a good idea. To hear government ministers saying that the Royal Mail is going to be floated on the stock exchange, obviously a polite way of saying privatisation, it just shows how trapped Westminster is in these type of economic policies. I think the only way to start to change this is to vote yes. It's not just the current Westminster government, of course, that's constantly failed ordinary people. Low-paid workers and trade union members in particular have, recently been absolutely hammered by the current government, but it's been going on for much longer than that. I mean, I think that this was shown quite clearly in the Falkirk debacle between the Labour Party and Unite the Union, and it just shows how tightly the grip of the Blairite right-wing section of the Labour Party has become. It's another example of how little the mainstream parties represent people in the workplace and in the communities. The idea that the Labour Party could be reclaimed from within as it purges out any social democratic voices, that idea is over, and I think we need real radical change. The trade union movement also needs real radical change. That I've got involved in the trade union when I first started working in the public sector, and I grew up in a household where both my parents were Labour Party members, interested in social justice and democracy, and I grew up with pictures of John Maclean and Clement, Atlee and James Connolly on my house, and I used to look at these people as icons, as figureheads, and the principles that they believed in about grassroots politics and engaging with community and giving ordinary people a voice. And I just think, what would these people be saying about the current situation we're in, and what they would think about the outright attacks on welfare state and the NHS. When Ed Milliband recently stated that the Labour Party would follow the same spending cuts as the Tories if they were elected in 2015, I was listening to it on the radio one morning. I was actually gobsmacked, like literally my jaw was dropping. I just couldn't believe that that was happening. I mean, I know I should know better not to be surprised, but and in a way I was thinking, well, this is definitely going to increase people voting yes. Capping the winter fuel payment for pensioners, capping benefit spending, combined with what's happened in Falkirk, just gives people more and more reasons to vote yes if you're interested in justice and fairness. I think we can't forget that trade unions might seem like, I think especially like I've done a lot of work with young members in the trade unions, and they do seem like maybe like a kind of an old-fashioned organisation, but they are the largest democratic organisations across all nations in the UK, and it's our voices that represent collectivism, and over again they have been shut out of mainstream politics and shunned by Westminster. The NHS has been dismantled across England, classrooms and schools are being sold off, Universal credit and welfare reform is throwing millions into Victorian-style poverty. Westminster essentially represents a parliamentary road to ruin for millions, and we need to change that path, and I think we need to start showing that another way is possible. For me, it's the core principles of trade unionism, economic justice, fairness, equality, internationalism and solidarity that really lie at the heart of the debate on independence. And I mean, what I mean by that is the way that ordinary people are currently being attacked from Westminster. This current economic crisis has been blamed on the poor. Now, statistics show that Britain is the 5th richest country in the developed world, but it's also the 4th most unequal society in the so-called first world. In Britain, there's a record number now of billionaires. There's a constant reminder, and it gets brought up quite a lot, about the Sunday Times rich list and how their wealth just keeps rocketing up as other people, ordinary people, are burdened with low pay, benefit cuts, the bedroom tax, and the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. And the lies we've been told about the economic crisis by politicians, by the right-wing press, is quite frankly disgusting. We're told that, you know, it's an over-generous public sector, it's a generous welfare system. Well, that's just not true. Welfare is not the issue here, and we've been peddled the lie that it's the rich and the wealthy, that their wealth will trickle down and raise us all out of the situation that we're in. Well, when you look across Scotland and you look at some constituencies, the rates of child poverty and life expectancy, it becomes very clear that that's just not true. And some things I want to see from an independent Scotland, and I don't think I'm alone, is a social security system that's fair and fit for purpose, a healthcare system that actually cares from cradle to grave, more jobs, but not just any jobs, jobs that are socially useful and make people feel worthwhile, and a nation that's for peace and not for war, that doesn't squander money and resources on nuclear weapons. I think it's important within the independence debate, particularly the argument I come up against in the trade union movement a lot is about, you know, well, Scottish workers have much more in common with, you know, other ordinary workers in Wales, other ordinary workers in England. There's quite a famous quote about it that was around the last time of the referendum, that was Scottish workers have more in common with London dockers, Durham miners and Sheffield engineers than they've ever had with Scottish barons and landlord traitors. But we need to look at the situation right now. All ordinary workers across all nations of the UK have more in common with each other than they do the City of London, and it's the City of London and the finance capital that represents that we need to move away from. Particularly within the trade union movement, obviously the idea of solidarity is so important to what we do. And the trade unionist concept of solidarity isn't defined by nations or borders or flags or what your accent is or where you come from. It's defined by the collective power that we have when we come together. I think one of the key areas that trade unionists for independence work on is demanding the repealing of the anti-trade union laws in Scotland, undermining those laws and breaking them here. I'm so glad that people agree with that, because I mean, it's so important. We need to demand these laws are repealed. We need to undermine them up here so that they become unworkable south of the border. And just as we show solidarity in our unions with Greek workers that are on strike when they're occupying their factories, miners in Asturias in Spain, we can show solidarity from an independent Scotland. We can lead the way, showing solidarity from Edinburgh to Birmingham, from Aberdeen to Liverpool. And I think it's important that we don't forget what Britain represents for a lot of people internationally. Britain, for many, has a thirst for war. And it's torn apart livelihoods, torn apart families, from Ireland to Iraq. Britain has attacked ordinary people internationally. It's attacked ordinary people both at home and abroad. Let Scotland lead the way for the interests of ordinary people. Let Scotland break from this finance capital in London. I think we've got everything to vote for now. It's been so long since I had any hope and real change. And see this, I mean, we're just over a year, there's a year to go basically. And I think we've got absolutely everything to vote for. The key thing on September and the 14th of September 2014 is that the Scottish people choose their own destiny and they vote yes and open up the possibility for that real radical change.